is x plus y negative? So we can write this as, is x plus y less than 0? And there's not really any more information in our prompt. There's really not any information at all. There's just a question. But just from glancing at the statements, I can see there's really only 4 possible scenarios here, because we don't, from our statements, we're not going to be given any values for x or y. And so if we want to determine if x plus y is less than 0, there's really 4 options, right? Because either x and y are both going to be positive, either x will be positive and y will be negative, x will be negative and y will be positive, or they will both be negative. And so we can see that if we know which scenario we're in, we can determine whether or not our answer is sufficient or not, or a statement is sufficient or not. Because here, if we have 2 positive numbers, that'll be sufficient to say no, right? Because that will always give us a positive value overall. So remember, don't confuse sufficient to say no with insufficient. That's still sufficient. If x is positive and y is negative, well, now that is going to be insufficient, because that is going to depend on the magnitudes of x and y. Same thing is true as if x is negative and y is positive, that will be insufficient, because we would have to know the magnitudes of each of those values. And then if x is negative and y is negative, then we are subtracting a negative number from a negative number. And so that will be sufficient, because that will always be negative. And that will be sufficient to say yes to our question, which really just means sufficient. So given that, you should be able to see that both statement 1 and statement 2 by themselves will not be sufficient, because in the first statement we don't know anything about y. Second statement, we don't know anything about x. So we're sort of going straight to looking at them together. And so if we know x is negative, y is positive, so what is that? That is this scenario right here, right? And that should be insufficient still, because we would have to know something about the magnitude of each of those numbers, because we can have x is negative 3, y is 5, and that will give us a value of 2. And that gives us a no to our question, because x plus y is not negative. But we could also have negative 3 plus just 2, which is negative 1. That would give us a yes to our question. So insufficient, even together. E.